Welcome back. I'm still talking to Telegraph columnist Robert Taylor. Robert, I want to talk to you about the NHS. Actually, a couple of quotes from Robert Jenrick, the Tory leader, hopeful, who I think is probably blazing the trail at the moment, getting most of the headlines. Before we get onto the NHS, he said over the weekend that one of the problems with the small boat crisis was that it's a come one, come all system. They arrive on our shores. Obviously, we don't send them back. We embrace them. We give them a hotel. We allow them to stay. And often we don't know who they are. And he basically says terror suspects by this system are just being allowed to, and I'll use his quote, to waltz in on small boats. And I think that's a big worry among many people here in this country, that apart from the fact we're letting in far too many people generally into this country illegally, who arrive illegally, we don't know who they are.
Yeah, we don't know who they are. We can't know who they are. They destroy their documents, some of them, when they arrive, and that just helps them stay, of course. So if you did have criminality on mind and you wanted to get into the UK, why would you run the gauntlet of the security officials at Heathrow or Gatwick or whoever? You could avoid all that, dodge all that, just come over on a small boat. And Jenrick should know. He was, of course, in charge of immigration, wasn't he? Resigned on principle because of that. He didn't think it was being taken seriously. So I'm sure he's right in what he says, that there are some very suspect characters coming across on the small boats who could well have harm in mind when they arrive.
And that's all the more worrying because of the rising tensions in the Middle East, obviously. Now, let's move on to Robert Jenrick's other significant quote of the weekend. This is something that I think will anger a lot of people. Turns out we're not sure quite how general this system is across the health service, but there are 5 London hospitals which are run by Imperial College. So these are 5 NHS hospitals where this is the official system, that foreigners who can't speak English are pushed to the front of the queue. So if you can speak English, you're pushed down the queue on the basis that they see the foreigners first, because the foreigners have to have interpreters, and interpreters cost us all money. So we get the foreigners, the non-English speakers, through the system first to save us money on interpreters. Now, if I was in the queue as an English-speaking sort of NHS user, told to wait because there's somebody who can't speak English and we need to get him out because of the interpreter, we need to get him through the system quickly, I think I might be rather annoyed. This isn't good enough, is it?
Yeah, well, I'd be thoroughly annoyed as well. I mean, obviously, you can sort of see the economic rationale that there's no point in keeping an interpreter on the clock for 4 hours in a waiting room. You can sort of see the rationale, but it must be completely infuriating for those who, need treatment and are kept waiting while someone jumps the queue, having come here and either doesn't speak English or hasn't tried to speak English. It just sort of says all you need to know about the dysfunctional nature of UK public services at the moment.
Indeed, and this dovetails into the amount of money we spend generally on interpreters. Isabel Oakeshott of This Parish, our international editor, she revealed a couple of weeks ago on this very show that our legal system, our justice system, is spending something like £25 million a year on translators because we've got so many migrants who come over who don't speak English. And, I suppose we have to do this, but there's something rather irritating about it, isn't there?
Irritating, frustrating, and it doesn't need to happen like this. I mean, the stat I often quote to people is that we haven't really got any more hospitals or hospital beds since the year 2000, but we've got 7 or 8 or 9 million more people. So, of course, waiting lists are going to go up. Of course, there's increasing pressure on hospitals and all the other public services because of the sheer scale of immigration. That's legal and illegal, of course. 9 million, I think, is the figure in the last 20-odd years, 24 years. Where have all these people gone? And they have to be housed. They have to be given the public services they need. And then we get to a situation, of course, where waiting times in hospitals are going through the roof. And of course, anyone who jumps the queue because they've got an interpreter is going to get very nasty stares from everyone else.
Yeah. In fact, if it was me, it might be more than a stare. I mean, infuriating. But I mean, I get it. I mean, but this is not a satisfactory situation, to say the least. In terms of Wes Streeting's general plans for the NHS, he came up with a few ideas a couple of weeks ago. But the essence of it is, and I quite like this, both him and Keir Starmer are saying there will be no more investment in the NHS, not another penny, until they've achieved reform. So Wes then came up with ideas about how to reduce the waiting list and all this sort of thing. Whenever politicians talk about reform, Wes Streeting included, you know, he's the latest in a long line of health secretaries who turn up and say, I'm going to reform the NHS. And they never, ever do. And one of the things that never crops up, and this was the same for Wes, is there are 3,500 non-medical middle management executives who earn £100,000 a year or more on six-figure salaries. Some of them are on more than £1 million. So between 100,000 and over £1 million. 3,500. Among those are 800, count them, 800 diversity officers. That costs £40 million a year. Diversity officers don't cure patients. So when you get someone like Wes Streeting turns up, and he's the latest in a long line, as I say, they never talk about this stuff. That's what they should be talking about.
No, well, they love all that diversity stuff, don't they? That's what a lot of them live for. So I'm not surprised Wes Streeting isn't talking about that. But let's see. As you say, no more money without reform sounds good. And it's the sort of thing that the Tories couldn't have got away with saying. There's no way they could have said that before the election and hoped to get any votes or get enough votes. So I hope Labour is serious on that. But like you, I'm not holding my breath. I think we can look across the channel actually at what some of the EU countries are doing, France and Germany, for example, where they have a sort of social insurance system. And ultimately, I think that's what we'll have to look at for our healthcare system, because the demand with an aging population is just going to go up and up and up. The money needed to support it is going to go up and up and up. And I don't think it'll be possible to carry on paying for it in the manner that we are accustomed to. Whether Labour would ever go that far, well, I really doubt it.
Well, they came up with the figure of something like £165 billion a year that we pay the NHS to exist, as it were. But I'd always worked on the basis it was about 200 billion. I mean, the figures are just bandied around are enormous. And it costs us too much. It's quite clear that a lot of savings could be made at a stroke if the NHS stopped being quite so barking mad. It is a basket case, and everybody knows it. And we go a long way, Robert, if we manage to get one politician, one health secretary, one prime minister, one politician to stand up and say the truth. And that is not our amazing NHS, not we are the envy of the world, but compared to countries like Germany and France, we are useless. Our NHS service is useless, and yet never do you come across a British politician who has the guts to tell us the truth. And therein lies our problem. It's our innate dishonesty about the nature of our NHS, isn't it?
I absolutely agree with most of that. The only thing I would say is that the NHS staff, most of them really do want the best for patients. It's the system that's letting them down. And obviously, I don't like striking doctors any more than anyone else. I think it's disgraceful, actually, to go on strike to get more money and letting patients down. But in general, the doctors and nurses of the NHS are doing a great job. It's the system they have to work within and the pressures upon them from a massively expanding and aging population that makes it almost impossible for the NHS to be world leading.
I agree. It's not world leading. It's far from it. We're the envy of the world. Lots of countries actually laugh at our system. But you're right, Robert. The point about the NHS is if you manage to navigate the ridiculous bureaucracy of it and the ridiculous delays, when you actually get to see the doctors and the nurses, these are the finest doctors and nurses in all the world. There's no doubt about that. But they are hampered by this lunatic bureaucracy, this lunatic overspending system that is frankly a national scandal. And whether or not Wes has got the wherewithal to get this house into order, I very much doubt, but we can keep our fingers crossed, I guess. Robert, excellent to talk to you as always. Robert Taylor there, columnist for The Telegraph.